Señor, abre mis labios y mi boca proclamará tus alabanzas. Lord, open my lips, and my mouth shall proclaim your praise. Amen. Blind Bartimaeus sitting by the roadside to Jericho. Jericho is this wonderful, wonderful place. It's the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. And if you see it now, it's not a huge metropolis or anything, but it's quite a lovely city. And it's apparently a very important geographically located city, so that if you needed to go from one side or the other, you had to go through Jericho. And people who had homes in Jerusalem had vacation homes in Jericho. So it was a main thoroughfare, and Jericho was kind of a destination place. So it was not unusual that Jesus ended up going to Jericho. And Bartimaeus knew that if he was on that particular road, that he would be able to catch sight or know that there were important people on that road. And so that's where he used to sit and beg. But there's some interesting things to note about this gospel and the progression of the words in the gospel. First of all, the blindness can be viewed in a number of different ways. We use the phrases about sight and blindness and seeing in many, many different ways in our language. It's almost a part of our daily discourse, like being blindsided or having insight or blind faith or just a variety of different ways that we use that phrase about seeing and having sight and so forth. So that it's a very much a part of our culture to be able to see. But there are different ways of seeing. And sometimes seeing isn't necessarily a visual context. Sometimes seeing is about understanding. It's about faith. It's about believing. And so Bartimaeus is, as is intimated in the story, actually is blind in the sense of not being able to see. But in spite of his blindness, there's a lot of things that he's aware of, a lot of things that he knows, even though he does not have his sight. He knows that Jesus is in the area. Perhaps he heard, because they came to Jericho. I'm sure that Jesus created quite a stir being in Jericho. And as he's walking down the road, Bartimaeus knows that Jesus is coming down the road. How did he know that? I don't know. Did people come ahead of him saying, "Hail, here comes Jesus," or what? I don't know. It doesn't say. But Bartimaeus knows that Jesus is coming down the road, and knows at what point he can say the words that Jesus can hear. So there's a lot here about how did he know all of this? What was it about Bartimaeus that though he was blind, he could see many things? The other thing that is interesting about this gospel is when the crowd tries to shush him, and so they're trying to, and it doesn't say the disciples, but the crowd is trying to shush him, and so they're kind of trying to dampen his spirits. But then when Jesus says, "Bring him to him," the crowd changes and is on his side and says, "Take heart. He wants to see you." And so Bartimaeus throws off his cloak. I love that phrase. He throws off his cloak and he springs up to go to Jesus. So there's this fluid motion of throwing off the coat and almost running to Jesus. There's this image of, unburdening or taking something off and running toward Jesus. Now, if you'll notice, there are some stories in the Bible where Jesus heals people, and afterwards, because they're so grateful and so astonished at their healing, they want to follow Jesus, but Jesus tells them no, to go and, back to where they came from to spread the word, or not because he doesn't want them, but because there's this other thing that he wants them to do. But Bartimaeus is said, he follows him on the way. So there's this, this sense of connection through this very brief gospel story. It's one of the shortest gospel stories we have. There's this connection, there's interconnectedness in this. And I also find it interesting that Jesus says to him, now here's this blind person, but Jesus doesn't assume that Bartimaeus wants to see again. He doesn't see a blind man coming toward him and say, oh, I know what he wants. He wants to see. He asks Bartimaeus to state, what is it that you want? What is it that you're looking for? What do you want from me? And Bartimaeus says this, I want to see again. Which means that at one time he did see. It wasn't a case of being blind from birth. At some point he did see. Let me see again. So, I don't know, there's just this relational kind of aura to this story that I find very compelling. And I think there's a humanity about it, or a commonality, something that resonates, that can resonate with us today. There was a woman who came to our church who was only with us very briefly. And when she came to our church, she was very frank, I guess is the word, about what drew her to the church. She came because she was dying. And she was seeking, what does this mean? I'm dying, and what is there? What's this journey going to be like? And so thankfully at the time we were beginning our confirmation class, and so she joined our adult confirmation class, and she and a couple of the other guys, Joel and Mike, joined us in class. And there was another couple that was going to come along, but they were not able to make it. And so it ended up that it was Joel, Mike, and Karen and myself. And we met, and there is a specific program that we use called Confirm Not Conform, which the young people did at the same time we were doing it, but the young folks were doing it with Father Don Deacon Don and Julia Gearhart, and they were doing it at the youth center, and so it was at a different time and it was a different group, but it was a similar curriculum, very, very good curriculum. But the timing of our curriculum, we paid no attention to. If we had questions, and all of this because we all knew of Karen's situation. Whatever questions she had, we sat and wrestled with, because we knew that these were not theoretical questions about someday this might happen. We knew that she was dying, and so that her questions had a poignancy, an urgency, so to speak, that you wouldn't otherwise have had. So when we talked about the afterlife or the creeds or the sacraments or any of that, it all took on an extraordinarily meaningful aura. And I think what happened was that Karen wanted to see. She wanted to see where this thing about faith and God, where did she fit in all this? Where did her faith lead her in these end times for her? Now, we didn't know the class was going to be over, confirmation was going to be over in June. And she didn't know if she would make it to Christmas. But she made it to Christmas, and then they found some program, some process that allowed her to continue a little bit longer, and then we didn't think she'd make it to spring. But she got confirmed here in June with the rest of the class and the other young people. And I had told the bishop about her journey, and of course, he had time with all of the confirmands, and it was just, it was a very lovely time together. And Karen continued to come to church, and got as involved as she could in the time that she had left with us. But through this whole thing, Karen was on a journey of discovery, a journey of belief and faith, and trying to see, trying to remove whatever blinders, whatever cloak she was wearing. That those first few weeks when she came to St. Paul's, she threw that cloak off. She wanted to know that there were going to be no obstacles between her and God and the faith that she thought she could get, that she could experience. And that made our faith stronger. It made our faith meaningful and less theoretical, because here was a person who was actually going through something very important. She knew that she was going to die. All of us have things that kind of weigh on us, that we have as a cloak. And Jesus is on this road, and we have the opportunity to say to Jesus, Jesus, I want to see again. I want to see again. We've got to throw that cloak off. Whatever it is that's holding us back, we have to want to take it off so that we can spring up and go to Jesus. But see, that last part, I think, is what we find so very, very difficult. He decided to follow Jesus. He decided to follow Jesus. And sometimes the cloak that is harder for us to throw off is that surrender, and even the word surrender kind of cringes, makes people cringe, giving in, being obedient, surrendering. It all sounds so difficult for us to swallow. But what God is saying is, follow me. Follow me. Believe in me. Trust in me. Bartimaeus is kind of the quintessential blind faith. He believed that Jesus could help him to see again, and that his life would be better, that his life would be complete by following him. So not only did he throw his cloak off, go to Jesus and ask for what he needed, but he followed him. And by following him, gained everything. Sometimes we don't want to let go because we're afraid that if we let go and if we give our lives over to God, that somehow we're going to lose something, that somehow we are subservient in some way. But it's so ironic. It's the opposite thing. When we give ourselves to God, it's when we find our strength, when we find our center, when we find the way that we can be strongest. Throw off the cloak. Spring up. Run to Jesus. Take the blinders off so that you can see. So that you can see that by being with God, by accepting Jesus and giving your life totally over to Jesus and Jesus' way of life, that will be your strength, your way of making it through life with, not that life is no longer challenging, but that you'll be stronger because you've got this relationship with God. That the problems that you experience, you won't experience by yourself. And there's always going to be that strength that God has for you to give you the way to go through the problem. strengthen you in the midst of that problem, give you hope in the midst of things that you think are never going to be solved. But you have to have that trust and faith, that blind faith like Bartimaeus did, that Jesus will see you through. Amen.